Oi you little fucker. I want to read something to you before we get cracking on. I'm going to read this. This was from an analyst report on Activision, what I found while I was looking on the internet. Not for nudie things, I was just looking on the internet and I found this. Right, I'll read this now. Activision has indicated that developers working on the most popular franchises will increase in aggregate by 20% in 2019. The increase in developers is anticipated to increase content updates to drive engagement and microtransactions and further develop the recurrent revenue model across different geographies. Brilliant. So Activision, you know, the company that had 800 layoffs this year in an industry that's been having nothing but layoffs, is expected to increase development, but not really on games, on microtransactions instead, on recurrent revenue instead, which, you know, is just an analyst report, but it sort of really shows you the priorities of the so-called AAA game industry. And speaking of priorities, we're now going to talk about the jock versus nerd dynamic of the video game industry, where we really look at what priorities are all about for big companies. Major clue, it's money. Priority is always money.
No, I've been thinking a lot lately about the industrial hierarchy of video games, how certain titles appear to be given more support because they've been given a higher status, a superior standing, than other games by the exact same publisher. Not just certain games, but certain studios appear to be given more resources and benefits, which is why DICE, getting to play around with an engine it has deep experience with, puts out amazing looking games like Battlefield 5, while BioWare puts out, well, this fucking shit. This idea of hierarchy was all but confirmed and put into a clear perspective for me by Kotaku's famous article, How BioWare's Anthem Went Wrong. We've talked in past videos about the lessons learned from this article, how it shines a spotlight on mismanagement and the psychological abuse of video game crunch periods, where employees are overworked to the point of mental breakdown. And it is abuse, by the way. If you coerce your developers into unhealthy work periods, you're abusing them. Simple as that. But we're not here today to talk about BioWare's abuse, and it is fucking abuse. We're today going to look at a lesser discussed aspect of BioWare's embarrassing Anthem tale, the lack of support given to them in comparison to studios like the aforementioned DICE. Within EA, it was common for studios to battle for resources, reported Jason Schreier, and BioWare would usually lose those battles. After all, role-playing games brought in a fraction of the revenue of a FIFA or a Battlefront. The moment I read this part of the report, I thought about school subjects and the disparity of support between them, most notably the famous tussle for funding between drama and sports. If you've never experienced this in your own school or seen it in the media, first of all, where have you been to miss this classic trope? And second of all, I'll let that classic 1998 movie The Faculty explain it to you.
And finally, Mrs. Olsen, there's just no money for a musical this year.
But I bet the football team gets their new jerseys and their new equipment.
Have you seen the football stadium on a Friday night, Mr. Tate? The entire town is there. This is a football town, let me remind you. And yes, the team will get new jerseys and new knee pads and new jock straps and anything else they want in the name of education, because that is what the school board wants.
God, that was one of the finest movies to only work in the 90s. Anyway, all of this is to say the AAA game industry is a football town, and those story-driven, single-player, role-playing games, well, they're the drama department. It might have been somewhat obvious, but it's now been unearthed for all to see that certain studios get preferential treatment because they're better at squeezing obscene amounts of money from customers via recurrent user spending. If you're still by now unfamiliar with that term, it's another way of saying microtransactions without actually saying microtransactions, because publishers have become all too aware of the negative connotations of that word. So they call it recurrent user spending to make it sound better. It don't sound better though. It's alienating corporate shit-speak. Some studios make games that bring home the bacon, while other studios make games that bring in the whole pig. The pig bringers are the ones the publishers favour, Obviously, because game publishers don't want to just make money, they want to make all of the money in the world. I know I've said that 1,000 times, but I repeat it for a reason. Publishers aren't just greedy, they're greedy in the extreme. No half measures, no middle ground. It's not enough to just profit. Publishers need to profit to the point of unsustainability, to make so much money they couldn't possibly make more, and then they want to break physics and make more money anyway because shareholders get pissed off when companies don't magically grow forever. The amount of support you'd get at EA on Frostbite is based on how much money a studio's game is going to make, stated one BioWare developer, and you can most certainly see the logic. Obviously, if something is more successful, you're going to want to put more of your resources into it. It's hard to fault even Electronic Arts, piss king of Dick Mountain that it is, for investing more into guaranteed hits. That said, however, the effect on the industry is very much the same effect this situation has on a school. The art suffers, while cynical business motivations flourish. The jocks get what they want. The drama geeks make do with whatever they can get. While we can argue the fairness or lack thereof in this ecosystem, one thing we can't argue is the detrimental effect it's had on BioWare's recent output. There are of course many reasons why Anthem and Mass Effect Andromeda were shitty, but it's clear that what Electronic Arts wants here is paradoxical. It desires ambitious, massive, meaty RPG experiences, a huge open world and tons of content so people don't trade the games in, but EA doesn't want to put in the required resources to make it so. And it's worth pointing out that we're not talking about failures here. These games sell well, they make money. They're not exactly burdens on Electronic Arts in that way, but they don't make all of the money in the world. They don't pack the football stadium in this football town. It's a grim reminder that despite what executives claim, single-player games are not dead. They were never dying, and they are not dying now. They are, however, being murdered by AAA publishers, slowly suffocated and strangled to make room for more recurrent user spending. The type of titles that are video games second and money-grabbing live services first. This major pivot we've seen toward live services is not the sign of a healthy industry. You see, while live services bring in ridiculous amounts of what publishers consider perpetual money, they do still hinge primarily on whales, the single-digit % of customers who spend ridiculous amounts of money on a single video game's microtransactions. There's also the common problem of live services demanding so much time from customers in a market already oversaturated with live service games. Many games feel like daily jobs now, and none of us have the time to play even a fraction of them. With EA, Activision and Ubisoft pivoting more and more toward live services, the industry is less like a school with a football team and more like a school with 50 football teams. There just isn't enough room for that to sustain. It may be why we still get one or two occasional gems coming out of the AAA woodwork, like Sekiro, being published by Activision. Publishers do, on some level, still recognise that a diverse range of customers who want a variety of products is healthier long term than putting all their eggs in one basket, but they always prove themselves willing to forget that notion so they can flood a market when the latest get-richer-quicker scheme comes along, live services being the latest one. So the lion's share of support goes to one particular type of game, loads of games that are of the same particular type, until the whole market collapses in on itself. It would be fair to say that it's not just because these games are live services that they get all the support. FIFA and Battlefield, they're also more mainstream games. They typically sell more copies on top of the recurrent user spending. But the live service gravy train certainly isn't helping the industry grow. It's not helping these games grow. Battlefield 5 and Call of Duty Black Ops 4 both sold below expectations. And it's usually almost always single-player games that get stuck in the below expectations rut. In any case, while it makes sense to put a lot of resources into something that's going to give a lot of money in return, doing so to the exclusion and detriment of other types of games that could bring in a more diverse audience is probably going to fuck you long term, which is something this industry struggles with all the time. It's been a recurrent theme on this show, how short-sighted the industry is. The football drama dynamic might not be so frustrating either if companies like EA didn't buy up all the drama geek studios and try to turn them into Football Jock Studios. In the past, I've referred to EA as Unichronic Arts for its habit of buying up studios, sucking all the nutrients out of them, and discarding the shriveled husks. The list of EA's victims is long and tragic and ever-growing. Decades of studios purchased, wrung dry of every conceivable penny, and eventually shut down. This is what EA does, and if history is set to repeat, BioWare's time is nearly up. After all, the publisher has a shiny new toy in the recently acquired Respawn, which will doubtless go through the same agonisingly slow death as it digests in the belly of the beast, because that is what EA does. Remember Dead Space? Remember how it was an atmospheric, creepy, precisely paced solo experience? Then Dead Space 3 became a microtransaction-fueled, cooperative action game that EA said needed to sell 5 million copies to survive. Afterwards, developer Visceral was put onto Battlefield fucking Hardline, and then it was killed. That's what EA does. It happens all too often in the industry. You make a certain type of game that earns you fame as a studio, a publisher requires you after you become famous, and then you're pressured into making games that aren't what you're famous for, because that's the way you get any goddamn support. It's a paradox, and it's no wonder so many studios close down after getting acquired by so-called AAA publishers, because they're working in a system antithetical to their own existence. This ain't simply about money. In fact, overfunding games is a big reason why so many perform below expectations, as companies dump absurd amounts of cash into games and have to ramp up their sales predictions accordingly, regardless of facts. No, the biggest resource BioWare struggled to get was time. It was working with the notoriously troublesome Frostbite engine, and it needed help from the Frostbite team, a team more focused on helping out FIFA and the like, because they were more important. So, because BioWare games are expected to be less successful, they are given less of the help they need to make the game successful, so the games struggle to succeed at every turn. The most miserable part of all this is that ultimately, as I said, logic is on the publisher's side to a notable degree. If something is going to be more successful, you're going to invest more in it. One of the reasons we get games like God of War or Super Mario Odyssey is because Sony and Nintendo are platform holders. They own the theatre, they can put on whatever play they like. They don't need recurrent user spending so much. They want to get you in the door, they want to get people buying hardware. This makes the industry line of single-player games being dead even more hollow because, well, big single-player games are certainly good enough to sell whole fucking consoles. Anyway, it does make sense for FIFA to get a ton of publisher attention if FIFA earns a ton of revenue. That's no excuse for ruining studios that don't make FIFA though, nor does it make the resulting garbage like Anthem acceptable. Publishers routinely vandalize games as an art form to exploit games as a business. Also, FIFA makes a lot of its money off predatory gambling systems, so it can fuck itself to hell. It's a bit sad that when news broke of Sekiro selling 2 million copies in 10 days, I was less jubilant and more dreading Activision telling investors it sold below expectations. That's not happened yet, and I hope it doesn't, but I've come to expect it from the industry now. Meanwhile, EA is cynically trying to get praise for itself by promising Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order will have no microtransactions or loot boxes following the shit it tried to pull with Battlefront 2. They don't deserve praise for it, by the way. You don't invent a problem, pretend you fixed the problem, and then let the praise roll in. EA doesn't get to fucking do that. It will be interesting to see, however, what happens there, and if EA does have some sort of catch coming with Fallen Order. One always expects a catch at this point. But even if Fallen Order is a straightforward solo game and sells really well, will the inevitable resulting series stay that way? Is Fallen Order just a foot in the door, sheep's clothing for EA's wolf? Will it turn into another drama geek game that'll be forced in time to twist and break itself to assume the form of a football jock game? Happened to Dead Space, happened to BioWare's output. I mean, we're already hearing that Dragon Age 4 might go that way, described in yet another Schreier report as Anthem with Dragons. It currently seems BioWare's last saving throw will be another unfocused, confused, desperate attempt at diving into the overflowing live service pond. One hopes something changes in time. EA's goals just don't work with what BioWare's fans expect from a BioWare game, which is why we've gone from tacked-on multiplayer in Mass Effect and Dragon Age to full-on service disasters like Anthem. And the report on Dragon Age 4's current current state only reinforces the drama football dynamic. BioWare games never sold quite as well as the FIFAs and Battlefields of the world, so it never felt like they could quite get as many resources as their colleagues at other studios. High-ranking BioWare staff openly wondered, did EA's executives really care about narrative? Did they really care about RPGs? Those questions have always lingered and still do today. It's not a question that really needs to linger. No. EA's executives do not really care about narrative or RPGs. They care about what they've always cared about. Money. Plain and simple. You all know it. You knew I was going to say it. You were thinking it yourselves the moment the question was asked. The answer is no. They don't care. On an individual personal basis, sure, EA high rankers might like and want nice stories in their games. But do they really care? Would they jettison all the artistry, creativity, and storytelling if doing so made them even a little bit more cash? Absolutely. We know because it's what they've done, what they do, what they will do again. Because this is a football town, folks.
The AAA industry is in a pissing rut. And really, if you want good solo story-driven stuff, you kind of really are looking at the indie market, which I do have to bring up as a sort of antithesis to the mess of the AAA industry. And I'm trying to find ways to talk about more indie games, because especially on YouTube, if you do something less known, and if you're positive about it, I do make jokes about it, but it is true, people don't watch it. So you can't really lift up and promote indie games if people don't watch the videos where you're doing it, because they have to see it for it to be promoted. So last week I smuggled in, I say smuggled, it wasn't subtle, popped in a plug for Sticks and Bones. I'm going to do the Shrouded Isle this week, unless it's the Shrouded Isles. I think it's the Shrouded Isle. You can get it on PC, it's on the Switch as well. That is sort of a combination of Darkest Dungeon and Reigns. Mechanically closer to Reigns, you're trying to keep these houses on an island happy, and while balancing various resources. If you run out of one, things go wrong. It's very similar to Reigns structurally. And then you've got to make sacrifices, like human sacrifices, throughout the thing, trying to weigh up who will be all right with it if you take a sacrifice from one particular family and who won't. It's very interesting. And I liken it to Darkest Dungeon in terms of tone. It's got that sort of bleak tone and a very similar art style, but it's actually got like this interesting, very limited colour art style. So yeah, I'm actually just saying this off the top of my head, so I'm not. This isn't a review or anything. It's just that's a game I played recently. It's not a new game, but it's been out for a while. But I've been enjoying it quite a lot, so thought I'd pop it in there. You know, do the best I can to at least shine a light on some lesser known games that people might like, while they wait for the AAA industry to unfuck itself, which it may never do. Probably won't ever do. So that's that. Play the Shrouded Isles, or at least look at it if that sounded interesting. And if it doesn't, or even if it does, no matter what you do, actually, one thing you can all do and all join together in doing is you can all thank God for me, because I'm worth it, like L'Oreal.